Hello and welcome. I am live from Pellam's Wasteland, and today I have another episode of Pellam's Wasteland Reads for you all. This time covering Batman Resurrection by John Jackson Miller, which is a recent release, was published in 2024. I can double check, I think, in October, actually, so even more recent than I thought. Um, and it's kind of an interesting idea in that this is a novel that is set within the continuity of the Tim Burton Batman films, Batman 1989 and Batman Returns, as the two that Tim Burton did, and then obviously Joel Schumacher did a pair of Batman films that are sort of in the same continuity, although who knows exactly how that fits together. And I guess it's a, contentious issue perhaps for some people. But for our purposes, we're just concerned with the first Batman movie with Michael Keaton, and then the second one, Batman Returns. And Batman Resurrection is not a movie, it's a novel, and it fits in between the two of those movies as something of a sequel to Batman and something of a prequel to Batman Returns, while also being sort of conceptually tied in to the broader Batman mythology, I guess you might say. All of the different cast of characters and, different uh, concepts and elements from the various Batman stories over the years that are kind of tied into the larger idea of Batman, even if they weren't on screen in either of those two films. Which is a really, I think, a cool idea. It's interesting the way that this particular concept is sort of able to take some of the things that are really fun in those movies and do kind of interesting and different things with those concepts or with those story elements, able to kind of tie itself into a specific kind of aesthetic a set of assumptions about Batman, and also to tie into a bunch of kind of specific story elements rather than just into the kind of general mythology of that particular character. And I think that's part of why this book is a lot of fun. So there's a sort of brief prologue that starts during the timeline of Batman, the first movie. And then most of the story is set basically 6 months after the end of the first movie. So Joker is has been killed after falling off the Gotham Cathedral. Batman is still doing Batman things, but there's all sorts of kind of consequences of the events of the movie that have surfaced and are now sort of what's at stake for Gotham City. So, for instance, there's a whole one of the kind of elements that is in this book is a hospital setting that is a specific ward that exists for Smilex victims, the victims of the Joker's special chemical compound that messes up a person's face and makes them smile and also kills them, which is a major plot point within the movie, of course. But we don't really see any of like the long-term consequences of all of that that part of the story. Really, I right, there's little bits and pieces in the movie, but we don't see like in the book there's a lot about like just how many people have been affected and all of the kind of different ways that people tried to get around it. So, for instance, in the prologue, it's one of the characters who we'll see later on in the book who is trying to buy out of state makeup, basically trying to buy makeup that has not been contaminated with all of these particular chemicals so that in this case, he's buying it for, he's an understudy in a play, and he's buying it for the main actor. And it turns out to not work. And his name is Carlo. His name is Carlo Babbage, but he gives the stage name Basil Carlo, and so I guess it's a minor spoiler, but it happens like literally 15 pages into the book, right? That this is going to be Clayface, and he is going to do all of his Clayfacey things, which is also kind of a cool place for something like this particular book to exist. That for those who don't know, the character of Clayface is able to reshape his face to seem like other characters, other people. He can, disguise himself very, very well as another person, and so the in some ways, this is a sort of interesting villain to have in a novel, because the technology for the transformation probably wasn't there in the late 80s, early 90s, at least to show the transformation actually like actively happening. Obviously, you could have the actor who plays the character who is being impersonated also play transformed Clayface, sort of like having the various actors in Face Off play each other's characters, that sort of thing. But it's kind of neat, some of the sort of elaborate action sequences and some of the sort of powers related stuff that is able to be shown in here that would be a lot more difficult in a film to coordinate all the different elements, or to show off the use of superpowers or things like that. So that's pretty cool. Um, anyway, all of that to sort of go back to what this is, we have things like the Smilex Ward. We have um, all of these sort of different disparate elements that we're familiar with from the movie that are being dealt with in interesting ways. So, for instance, the I think it's the Flugelheim Museum in the movie and in the book, that is the art museum that Joker trashes in the movie. And in the book, we hear about them selling off a whole bunch of their collection that has been damaged by Joker's attack that happens in the movie. And people are going wild for all of this kind of strange Joker memorabilia, and he's becoming sort of a cult hero. And there's a whole new gang, they call them the Last Laughs, that are people who either were kind of originally members of Joker's gang in some cases, or more often they've sort of been inspired by the character of Joker, which nowadays I think is a kind of a classic concept in a lot of this different versions of the Batman mythology, I guess. But I think about like watching Batman Beyond as a kid, and that's one of the ideas, is that there is an eventual, there's the movie Return of Joker, but before that point, um, Joker is a character who has long since disappeared and is not really relevant to the cyberpunk era that Batman Beyond is mostly taking place in. But there's a gang that sort of is upholding his memory and kind of uses the Joker idea as their particular version of the aesthetic assumptions for the gang, and also their sort of rallying cry, I guess. Um, which is always a fun concept. At least I think that this sort of idea of the way that all of these kind of characters in the world are reacting to and responding to the things that happen in the world that are familiar to us as viewers or readers, but also are sort of making an impression on the like cultural landscape and things like that. And so that's pretty cool. Anyway, all of this kind of gradually starts to accelerate into a Batman story that is, like I said, a lot about the kind of after effects of the events of the movie. Batman is clearly or Batman himself, Bruce Wayne, is clearly suffering from some underlying issues. He's having all of these weird nightmares about the Joker, and he's worried about kind of whether it's possible that the Joker might have survived, whether he might have like faked his own death, um, whether he's you know basically part of one of the things that I think is cool in here is that there are a lot of elements that I guess if you got really pedantic, you could call them like minor plot holes in the original movie that Batman is concerned about when he thinks back on it. So, for instance, in the original movie, one of the revelations is that Jack Napier, who is the Joker, before he becomes the Joker, when he was young, he's the one who shot Thomas and Martha Wayne, who killed them in Crime Alley and set Bruce Wayne on the path of being Batman, basically. And this is a fairly major revelation that happens at basically the kind of transition from Act Two to Act Three in the original film, basically. Um, and so in the finale of the film, Batman confronts the Joker, and Joker says, "You made me," because Batman is the one who, in Joker's mind, when he blocks a bullet with his gauntlet and it bounces around and hits Joker, and he falls into the vat of acid at Axis Chemicals, all of that sort of stuff. And so Joker's like, "Ah, you made me," and Batman says, "Well, you made me." Um, and what Joker responds with in this back and forth is he says, "Well, I was a kid when I killed your parents." Um, and in the movie, it just sort of happens. And I think it's totally fair to assume that this is just kind of Joker saying basically anything to keep the conversation going so that he's not getting actively beaten up by Batman. But in the book, we have a whole sequence of Batman being concerned, like, did the Joker actually like figure it out? Did he actually know that he was young when he killed the Waynes, and figure out that Batman is Bruce Wayne, and that therefore that this is not just kind of a throwaway line, but is actually a like a specific response to the information that Joker knows about Batman, and if he knows who Batman is, then who else might know, and all of that sort of stuff. Um, and it's really, I think, a clever. There's some similar stuff with like there are a couple of sort of henchmen who attack Batman while he's in the belfry in the cathedral. And Batman didn't, in the movie we don't see them go into the belfry, and so we don't um, kind of have an explanation for how they end up there. And so Batman is wondering, like, okay, well, were they maybe part of like a planned sequence where Joker was trying to figure out, Joker had a whole plan to do things in the Belfry so that he could fake his own death so that then he could come back, basically. Um, and that's, I think, a really fun part of this particular story if you are familiar with that original movie. In my case, I rewatched it before I read this book just because I wanted to brush up on it and all that sort of stuff. Um, and I think that's really, really, a lot of fun and cool, and it's neat to see that kind of like engagement with small details from the the original. Or, for instance, there's a one of the kind of secondary antagonists in this book is Leonard, who is a character who shows up in Batman, that first movie, and he carries a big jukebox, and so in this one he carries a jukebox around, and he's uh, a similar kind of a minor character who has progressed from the film to the novel in a fun and interesting way. And there's lots of these, characters that have progressed in that way. So, you have, I can't remember the reporter's name, and obviously Commissioner Gordon shows up. If you don't remember the character of Harvey Dent in that original Batman movie is played by Billy D. Williams, who of course played Lando Calrissian in the Star Wars original trilogy, um, and he is very clearly written as that particular, very like charismatic and slick character in this book. And I thought that was really fun, the little nod to that particular interpretation of that character, who is not always like that, right? Harvey Dent is sometimes a lot less slick and charismatic, right? Well, I mean, he's always pretty charismatic, but he's not always quite so slick, basically. um Anyway, and there's a lot of cool things like that. A number of the characters who make appearances again, and a lot of kind of back and forth that is sort of both about the after effects of that original movie, and also has its own, classic Batman story going on, that I already mentioned includes Clayface. We find out about Clayface, like I said, like 15 pages into the book. Find out right away that that's part of what is going on. But of course, that also sort of, as you might guess, ties in with the concerns about resurrection and potentially Joker being back and all that sort of stuff. And I suppose I'll leave it to the reader who is interested in this book to find out exactly how all of that takes place. But I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was a lot of fun to get into that particular element of this story and kind of all the different things. So yeah, pretty fun book. Not like high literature, as I say sometimes about the things that I like to talk about on here. But definitely like very readable. Does a good job. I think it's impressive to be able to do like some of those superhero action scenes and have them feel like cohesive and exciting in a format that we don't often see them in, and so that was pretty cool. And ultimately, yeah, I mean, I'm a nerd about Batman stuff, as much as anything, from playing the Batman Arkham games for Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours and stuff. So anyway, book's a lot of fun. I would recommend you check it out if you are also a Batman nerd and you like the idea of this particular type of, um, like a not really a retcon, but a 30 years after the fact sequel, and a sort of prequel to Batman Returns. Like I mentioned, there's a number of characters who are in Batman Returns who get to show up. Not Penguin, I don't think, but like Christopher Walken's character um, makes an appearance in here, and he's doing things and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, there's some cool, and I guess Selena Kyle, Catwoman, before she's Catwoman, gets to show up and be on screen once or twice and things like that. So that's pretty cool too. Anyway, that's going to be it for me for today. Thank you so much for watching or listening. I hope you have enjoyed a bit of a discussion of Batman Resurrection by John Jackson Miller. Um, I guess that will be all for me for today. So I've been live from Pellam's Wasteland, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody.